This is the first of 6 videos on applying human resource best practices to small businesses based on the employee lifecycle model. This video is going to cover the outreach stage. I want to give you some background information. 50% of all small businesses fail within their first 5 years of operations. In my research, I found that failures were directly related to lack of human resource best practices. So I identified the human resource best practices for all businesses. Then I performed a quantitative study to determine which human resource best practices small businesses implemented to keep themselves in business past the 5-year point. And I developed an implementation strategy for those small businesses based on size and budgets. There are 6 stages to the employee life cycle: outreach, recruitment, onboarding, performance management, development, and offboarding. This video is going to cover outreach. So the outreach stage basically establishes your company's brand. It's how you portray yourself to your current and future employees and to the community. Many of the current job seekers look for organizations online to try and get information on companies that they would like to work for. You need to make sure that your current employees agree with what you're portraying. Otherwise, the two will not match and they will think you're being dishonest. So what is the best practice for the outreach stage? It's establishing an organizational brand. An organizational brand, you advertise your products, your work-life balance, your social responsibility, training opportunities, your work environment, your diversity. People want to work for an organization they can relate to. Your brand should have enough information to accurately portray what it would be like to work for your company. People want to understand what you make, what kind of time off policies that there are, whether you are socially responsible, giving back to the community. They want to know what training opportunities there are, what work environment exists, and the diversity of employees. Not everyone is interested in all these images. However, they encompass the most often specified by surveys. So what is the basis for this best practice? Outreach is based on branding, social theory, and motivational theories. Branding is the same as the marketing term. You want to establish the things that you want them to associate with your name. There are 2 theories for the outreach stage. The first is social theory. Others perceive your values aligned with who you work for. It's important that the company you work for shares your values. If not, an employee will not be fully engaged in the organization. They will not talk about the organization positively, and they will not go the extra mile. Individuals thrive when they identify with the team and the organization they work for, and the organization shares their values and attitudes. There are 2 motivational theories that are associated with the outreach stage, and you're probably familiar with these. One is intrinsic motivation, and the other is extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic, or internal, and extrinsic, or external. Intrinsic and extrinsic motivations are well researched and do exist. Intrinsic or internal motivation is really the motivation to strive for. If a person likes the work, feels good about the organization, salary and other benefits will play a less important role. By advertising what you do, how you do it, and what it's like to work for your organization, people that identify with what you're offering will be motivated intrinsically to go further and see what jobs you have to offer. So why is this important? Regardless of an organization's size, research has shown that organizations that accurately portray their brand will retain employees longer, the employees will have higher job satisfaction ratings, and they meet the employer-employee psychological contract. Let's talk a little bit about the psychological contract. It begins with the outreach stage and it continues through the employee's employment. And it's an informal contract. There are many psychological contracts. All are informal and mainly perceived. I believe you're going to take care of me if I take care of you, is one way to think about it. When you go into a grocery store, there's an unwritten promise that they have fresh food that is not tainted or expired. The grocer expects that you will not say bad things about the store if provided the items that you need. So if an employee believes that the organization will live up to its brand, what you've advertised, and the employer believes that the individual will perform if it keeps its brand promises, when these are broken, that is when people separate and go look for another job. Or if, on the employer side, they let the person go. So now that we know what the best practices are, let's talk a little bit about the survey results that I got. Each question that we asked was scored on the following scale. 1 was strongly agree, 2 was somewhat agree, 3 was somewhat disagree, and 4 was strongly disagree. Each of the survey questions were scored by HR or management personnel according to this scale. The wording was set up to determine if the human resource business practice was a standard practice and if it was always followed. If the respondent answered with a 1 or 2, it indicated that it is a standard practice for them and it is followed completely or with some exceptions. If they scored a 3 or a 4, then that element could be a standard practice, but it was not practice at all. So these were the outreach survey questions that we asked. Work environment. Our social media presence displays our work location, safe work environment, and helpful, friendly coworkers. Corporate and social responsibility. Our social media presence defines our organization's stringent code of conduct initiatives, including health, education, and environment. Training and development. Our social media presence projects our training and development opportunities. Work-life balance. Our social media presence projects our working policies such as flex time and work from home. So there were 4 elements that compose that one best practice. Now let's look at the results. There are several ways to look at the results. If you take the first question that was concerning work environment, if you add the 2 agree columns, you can say that it is a standard practice. However, only 29% enforce it and feel strongly about it, and 47% still do it, but they make certain exceptions. Most small businesses have limited budgets and must have a strategy based on all the life cycle stages, expanding each of these HR best practices when they can afford it. So looking at Table 2, it reveals several facts concerning the outreach stage. An agree response indicates that the respondents considered the element part of their standard practice. There is a significant difference between the strongly agree and somewhat agree columns. If you're looking at the strongly agree, no element was implemented by more than 29% of the organizations surveyed. Outreach has been a steadily growing best practice as more and more businesses recognize that the job seekers are heavy internet users. If you combine the strongly agree with somewhat agree responses, there is a trend to increase the content of an organization's media presence to include each element. The organizations believe that, or are trying to include, each of these elements in their social media presence. So what are the priorities for small businesses? Implement the work environment element in your social media. The work environment was the highest ranking element with a combined implementation of 76% of the respondents. And if budgets allow, implement corporate social responsibility and training and development. If you're a large company and you have the budgets, you should be including all 4. I've included some references to the major studies that I researched on motivation, value propositions, uh, employee retention, human resource management. If you're interested in researching further the theories behind this stage. Next, we're going to look at the recruitment stage. You want to set yourself up for attracting the best person for the position you're advertising.